Welcome to the Agility in Real Life podcast, Take 5 in Real Life. Now your hosts, Mike Studeman, Jeff Lee, and Pat Campbell.
Hello and welcome back to the Take 5 IRL podcast. I'm Jeff Lee, a partner at Agility IRL, and with me today is not one of my other partners. We have a guest today, Kelly Weyrauch from Agile Quality Systems. Thanks for joining us, Kelly.
Glad to be here, Jeff. Nice to partner with you again.
Yeah, so Kelly partners with us often, and we're going to be doing a few episodes here around agile in regulated environments, something Kelly has deep experience with when he was at Medtronic. He actually worked with the FDA to come up with documentation around how agile can work in the medical environment and med device specifically, but also that can really be extrapolated to other regulatory industries. So Kelly, can you say a little bit more of your experience there?
So I've been using agile methods for a long time. Back in my days at Medtronic, a long time ago in the late 90s, a couple of our advanced concepts groups were exposed to extreme programming in Scrum and were dabbling in it for a while. Until in 2002, a group of us went to one of the Agile conferences and decided we needed to make this work in our environment. So I've been using Agile methods in medical device organizations ever since. And in that initial transition, there was a concern of what are regulatory people going to think about our use of Agile development for a safety critical medical device software application. And so we approached the industry association, AAMI, who provides guidance on a variety of topics. And we got connected to the software group, which eventually created a subgroup to create what became AMI TIR 45, guidance on the use of Agile methods for medical device software. And I was one of the lead authors on that committee. And I did classes through AMI for a while and now do training on my own, including the CARS course in partnership with Agility IRL on applying the concepts of TIR 45. Now, as a consultant, I work with, sorry, I'm going to remind you that you said about the FDA was involved there. The FDA was on that committee. AMI consists of Industry Association and the US FDA. So the FDA people helped write the document. Now, as a consultant, I do training on it, and I work with medical companies to bring Agile into their environment, and using the guidance to TR 45, we make the quality system rules and Agile fit well together.
So in some of our upcoming podcasts, you're going to hear us go deeper into the med device industry and TIR 45. But in this one, we want to broaden it out a little bit and talk about regulated environments in general. So Kelly, I'm curious, you've been doing this for a while, right? More than 2 decades since that 2002 experience you were talking about. Yeah, sorry to bring that up, but it's been a while. So what are some of how have you seen things evolve over time, and what are some of the objections that people still have or concerns about agile and regulatory environments?
Well, first, some of the common concerns, I'll list a few. I see several misalignments that I see in expectations from a quality system process perspective in the Agile world. The biggest one by far in the medical device industry is the medical device world all follows a very similar stage gate model. It's very linear waterfall phase gate, and it implies that things have to be done in a certain order. And that really conflicts with Agile's incremental evolutionary approach, where you do things incrementally, you do things in smaller bits instead of big bang bits. And that common concern is still there. Many medical organizations still have these phase gate processes, even when they're using Agile development within their software organizations. So they're trying to live within it. A common concern a few years ago was FDA assumes waterfall. And in talking to organizations, well, where did this assumption come from? It's not in FDA guidance. I think we're blaming the FDA for something that's really of our own making. And that's because we've trained regulators to be linear because our processes all look linear. They're used to doing that. And so some of the concerns are, well, how are we going to get over those assumptions? And we'll talk a little bit more about that coming up. But one way is to simply tell the regulators, we are doing things a little bit different than what we've told you before. The controls are different in the Agile model, and we can show how they're there. Another common concern is an organization feeling like they have to have these linear gates as the control mechanisms and not willing to embrace different control mechanisms. One of the nice things about phase gates is it gives the illusion of control, and that might have been true in a more linear model in years ago. It doesn't fit well the incremental model, so we have to have different incremental controls instead of the phase gate controls.
Yeah, well, and that level of like phase gate control, in my experience and observation, it really stifles creativity. It stifles innovation. some of those things that are really essential for companies in the modern era to keep up with the competition and stay ahead, keep their advantages that they started with.
Yeah, a typical early phase is a concept phase turning into a feasibility phase, ending with some amount of commitment to a defined product scope, a defined timeline, duration, date, and a defined cost. And there's this belief that we can get this all figured out and then execute. And that simply doesn't match the reality of the world. I'd argue even 20 years ago, we weren't very good at it. But now the pace of change is so fast that the belief that we can predict the future of a product that takes a year or even longer to develop is simply not the way the world works. Things change. And so these phase gates that imply I've locked down the definition, I now discourage change, but not willing to let a plan evolve is a common constraint. People thinking you can just control things. And instead, we have to embrace that the world is going to change whether we like it or not. We have to be good at managing that. And the
So you
Agile
mentioned a
models
couple of
provide
things
mechanism
there.
to control that.
Yeah, so this illusion of control, these stage gates to stay there, the unwillingness to change once this giant project is in motion. What other, common anti-patterns do you see at companies that make, agile product delivery challenging?
Well, one of the biggest ones that I'll talk about, and there's several aspects to this related to this linearity, is the linearity of we have to define something, then design and build it, then verify it, then validate it. And things have to go in that order. And along with rules like we can't run a test until the protocol for it has been written and approved. We can't take credit for running the test. We have to wait until these things have happened. And so that manifests itself in things like formal verification, formal runs, as opposed to what. And so a story I like to tell with people when we're describing this, I ask, what does the word formal mean to you? It's kind of like the movie The Princess Bride. So for those who know that movie, the Vizzini character, the mastermind of the criminals, every time something doesn't go right with his plan, he says, inconceivable, until the other character finally says, you keep using that word. I do not think it means what you think it means. I think that applies to the word formal. We use this term formal run, but that definition of formal, you won't find anywhere in a dictionary. What do we mean by it? It means things like the final run on an approved protocol, documented as opposed to undocumented, tightly scripted as opposed to not tightly scripted. And the Agile model of continuous integration and tests says, let go of all of that. All tests are worthy of documenting. All tests are worthy of running for credit. All tests can be run multiple times, and we make decisions of how often to run tests. So getting over this linearity of verification is a common problem because many organizations are locked into this idea of a formal test phase.
Yeah, when we do you mentioned the CARS class, the Certified Agile Regulatory Specialist, the unit in there about any sequence we'll do, I think really resonates with people to understand that, you can, use some extreme programming principles and run the test and watch it fail and then build the thing and then watch the test pass. And that's valid, right? You don't have to go through any particular sequence. And that gets into another anti-pattern that I see in companies. A lot of times people run around holding the regulatory card, right? This thing like, no, we have to do it this way because of the regulations. But what they mean by that, or what they think the regulation is their own company's procedures, which are often, they were built to satisfy regulations, but they aren't the regulation, right? They put this unnecessary steps in there to create this linear model that you were talking about, where the regulations don't require that.
Yeah, because the processes have been around for a while, we think that they're really good. They've worked for us in the past, and we become thinking that these are rules that came to us from somewhere else. But and we get into the CARS course and we pick into the details of the regulation, which isn't very big. It's certainly not very prescriptive. And the guidance that comes with it, we recognize we have a lot more choices than we think we have. And so rather than blame the regulators for a process that doesn't seem to fit well, we should be looking at our own rules to say, these are the rules we created. We ought to create different rules to get a different outcome.
Yeah, which also often feels like when you're in an individual contributor at a company feels like that's like untouchable. But the only way to get a change is to raise that. And these things can be changed. You see it happen all the time. You work with companies to change them.
I use this all the time in training and the coaching to say, if you don't like the rules, they're rules you made up. So if you don't like them, change them. And you have to address the intent behind the rules to recognize, well, there's a different kind of control mechanism to get the same intent. We want to be in control of our design. That's the essence of design controls, be in control.
Mhm.
The Agile model of incremental evolutionary development and the control mechanisms built within that are a different kind of control mechanisms. We need to make those work.
Yeah, all right. So we've been talking a fair amount of all the things that go wrong and all the problems that we've created for ourselves. So let's pour some sunshine through these clouds. Like, what are some keys to making agile delivery work in a regulated model?
Well, the first plug is use TR 45. The reason that guidance was created was to give industry guidance, not only the medical device manufacturers, but regulatory bodies as well. Give guidance of how to do this well. Follow the recommendations in the TIR. Position your quality system in a way that demonstrates to an outsider you are in control, you are meeting the design control regulations, you have a good product because you've applied these well-established concepts. And one of the key things, one of the things that I really like about the Agile environment is everybody owns quality. You have to build in quality as you go in an incremental evolutionary model. This isn't somebody else's job to test in quality at the back end. Quality has to be built in as we go. So providing the mechanisms, again, guided from what TIR 45 talks about in specific and using good Agile practices in general are ways to make it work. And the continuous feedback you get in the Agile model that tells you, is this working? Every time you see a test failure you didn't expect, you ought to ask, how did that happen? And we use the retrospective practice to decide, hey, we could do something different here. Or the other way around, things are working great. Every time we demonstrate something, we get good feedback. Every time we run tests, they pass. We're doing great.
Yeah.
So apply the mechanisms of Agile and you'll get a good result.
Yeah, the one thing for me, I think the biggest thing is for people to shift as many things as possible to the left, right? So instead of waiting for a release to do a regression test, do it every single sprint. Instead of waiting to some integration point to make sure your documentation is all lined up, do it every single sprint. And what that means is you're not going to write as much code every sprint because you're doing other things. You're keeping everything done. But that gives you flexibility. It gives you the ability to pivot. And it also forces you to write down the current state of things when you know the current state of things. I've been on initiatives where at the end of a 3 or 6 or 9 month project, we're trying to update the requirements document to be what we actually built, as opposed to what we signed off 9 months ago. That's not good, right? Do that every sprint, which I find, the FDA in the med device or other regulatory bodies, they're going to like that a whole lot more than if you're following a waterfall process with all sorts of things you're trying to button up at the end.
Well said. This is one of the things the FDA people on the TIR 45 committee really liked, is they saw that design controls were embedded everywhere. This overly simplistic stage gate model has some nice control mechanisms to be sure, but it's not where full quality comes from. It comes from everybody thinking in this quality mindset all the time. Everybody's responsible for it, and we satisfy quality all the way along, every sprint, everything we do.
Yeah, good summary right there. So I think we'll wrap it at this point. Our Take 5 IRL podcast is a little bit more than 5 today, but a great discussion, Kelly. And we will be continuing this series. So come back and hear more about Agile, specifically in the med device space. We'll be getting to that in our next episode. So thanks again for joining us. Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Take 5 IRL podcast. If you like it, please go ahead and share it with someone, as well as like and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. We are available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. Also, leave us a comment or a suggestion for a future episode. Again, thanks for listening, and we look forward to you joining us next time on the Take 5 IRL podcast.